feel you'll come out of lockdown a different person. We had about 100 days where life was totally different. And we're asking whether that changed you in a permanent way. I'm joined by Dave Chawner, a stand-up comedian from London. Different story from you, Dave, I know.
Yeah, it's not been ideal, Jeremy, because at the start of the pandemic, unfortunately, I lost my dad, who I was incredibly close to, who was relatively young, and it took him very quickly. And then after that, I used to, as well as being a stand-up comic, be a reporter for a radio station. I got made redundant from that job, and then the Edinburgh Fringe was cancelled, which means I've lost £5,000 to £10,000 and had no income coming in. And then I found out at the start of the month that there's going to be no more eggheads, and I think that was, sort of like the final nail in the coffin.
We don't know that for sure, but you're right. I can see how that would be almost the worst thing. So, all right, you go into lockdown, and the biggest thing here is you lost your dad, and I guess you can't. Your mum is still with us, is she?
She is, and it's been so tough for her because they were married for 45 years, and 67 is no age, and that was relatively fit and healthy. Yes, he did have diabetes, but I think the thing that was most difficult was it was so quick, because he was, as I say, diabetic, and his blood sugar started being a little bit wobbly on the Saturday, and on the Monday night I phoned him in the evening, and 6 hours later he was no longer with us. So it was just like a train hitting you. And I'll be honest, I don't really think that I've completely processed it, because the whole thing with lockdown has just been so weird for everyone that I think there's 50,000 people that have lost loved ones, families, friends, brothers, sisters, and I think that grieving process is going to take a bit of time, because it just seems so surreal for everyone at the moment.
And were you able to reach out to your mum during lockdown, or were you effectively separated by it?
I went up there to support her because she needed a lot of help. Everything from sorting out the pensions, the bills, the council tax, all the way through to the more mental, psychological stuff of helping organise the funeral. So I've tried to be there as much as I can with her, but there is a great big rift because she's in the Midlands, I'm further down south, so the only thing that I can do is call her every day.
How have you been in the middle of all this?
It's a good question, and I think I would be lying if I'd said it would be peachy. But then I also don't want to pretend like I've got it the worst. I think everyone is struggling in their own ways, whether that is redundancies or having their kids at home. And I think the truth of the matter is it's actually quite hard to tell how mentally you're dealing with something in the situation. I think a lot of the time you get that perspective of hindsight to be like, oh, that was really rubbish. But I think the important thing is that I appreciate a lot of the things now that I would have absolutely taken for granted. Even things like being able to have freedom and exercise or seeing family and friends. And that's the sort of thing that I want to focus on more, of what have I got out of this. And I was lucky to have known my dad and be incredibly close to him, because he was a brilliant bloke, and I'm so lucky to have known him for 32 years. So that is something that not everyone gets.
Well, condolences to you, Dave, on your loss, and thank you very much for speaking to us. Dave Chawner, stand-up comedian from London. We're talking about the ways in which lockdown has changed you permanently.